This is part two of that message. I began doing research specifically about this scrubber policy in the fall of last year. It followed an effort I had made to go through the court system. And it came to me that these changes were coming up. I had previously come across them over a year and a half earlier, but didn't start investigating them until the fall of last year. And one of the things I did was I researched a number of companies to identify the origin of the technology that was supposed to be involved in this scrubber process. I also revisited that at the beginning of the year. As a matter of fact, on a major date wherein this was supposed to be implemented, there was a congressional hearing, a congressional committee meeting before a meeting before Congress of people involved in the maritime industry. But it wasn't about the scrubber technology. It was about something else. My concern was that Congress knew exactly what was going on in the maritime industry, and rather than challenging what were potential abuses of this systematology, that they were setting up benchmarks. Now, at this time, even though it was in calendar year 2020, there was no mention of the coronavirus outbreak, and there was no mention of COVID 19. But within the last week, my understanding is that there was an announcement by the President of the United States having to do with the shower head. The thing about this is that now, when I am attempting to do this research, there is reference to wash water and how wash water involved with maritime vessels is impacted by these requirements to update the emissions standards. There's been some notices about companies and their compliance. There was actually a notice that I found just yesterday that talked about how this past week there had been an announcement that container ships had overtaken crude oil ships in terms of implementation of standards regarding scrubber technology. I found the information in a source last night. As I said, prior to this week, it hadn't been discussed as far as I had noticed as wash water. Now, the concept technologically of what is meant by wash water makes sense if what they're explaining about this technology is accurate. But the actual manner in which it is referenced was not done in this manner in last autumn and or the beginning of this year when these changes were going into effect. Did the President of the United States make a derivative public notice about upgrades or updates to maritime shipping vessels in terms of their compliance with getting clean, using what turned out to be a notice that the Department of Energy was going to change standards on the amount of water that was allowed through or that was to be acknowledged as being permitted through particular brands of shower heads? This is the problem with the situation at this point in time. I believe that there was a process that was implemented that I was witness to while I was homeless on the street, where people that were homeless, including people that had been forcibly made homeless, including people that had been forcibly sent to places like homeless shelters and domestic violence shelters at very specific times, were intentionally sent there so that their human capital could be dispossessed and expropriated from them and then reassigned as the assets of organizations that provided donations or that had representatives of their companies on the boards of directors of those nonprofits, those charities, with the understanding that then they would be able to use that person's human capital up to and including that person specifically as their asset. And insofar as I'm in Texas, and I've witnessed this in Texas, my understanding is that those assets were specifically supposed to be made available because members of the petrochem sector and the gas and oil sector knew that they had every intention of defaulting. So they needed assets through which to launder their toxic assets. It's one of the reasons why these discussions about executive compensation is so important, This is the same sort of thing that was going on around the time they started identifying Enron and Arthur Andersen. But what we've forgotten to discuss, especially now that presumably there are peace talks with the Taliban in Afghanistan, is that one of the major projects that Enron was involved in early on was presumably a gas pipeline through Afghanistan and other countries of that area. At the time, the Soviet Union did not want to participate. They removed themselves. The United States, through Enron, and Saudi Arabia maintained their commitment to work on that gas and oil pipeline. Now, when this is happening, when we're dealing with COVID 19, we're supposed to be doing what in relationship to the green energy paradigm? Do we need to reduce our consumption of energy? Yes. But we need to be careful as the United States of America. It has been known for several years that despite the fact that, relatively speaking, we have a disproportionately low population, the United States alone consumes 40% of the world's energy. When we listen to and we hear people talking about the kind of developing world and emissions and pollutions in other countries, we have to put this in perspective with understanding that our way of life here in the United States is responsible, the last time I checked, for 40% of the world's overall energy consumption. And part of our justification has been trying to entice people with the benefits of the kind of technology that we have available and have been trying to promote around the world. I don't agree that what we've been doing with technology and the manner in which we allowed that technology to develop justifies the expenditure of the world's energy resources. And I'm not alone. We're at a very crucial time. COVID 19 was a biological terrorist attack. They want to say that the disproportionate impact of COVID 19 in what they call the first phase has been certain countries. Why? I'm really hoping that this is taken seriously today, and I'm really hoping that whatever the President of the United States actually was getting at with his shower head comment is not the same thing Barack Obama was getting at with his Indian head deal.